Hello friends and welcome back to MSFS Flight Plans, your ultimate destination for virtual tourism in MSFS 2024. I'm Nick and my mission is not just to show you the coolest, most interesting, and best looking places in the simulator, but also tell you about all the amazing stuff that we're going to be seeing on the ground. And if that's not reason enough to join our elite club of awesomeness, I'm going to give you a flight plan, a bookmark file, both you can use in a little nav map. And if you don't know how to use that, by the way, I do have a tutorial that'll show you everything you need to know down in our how-to section. But I'm also going to show you, which I've been doing for the past couple flights, posting some links to videos that other YouTubers have put online. As I'm researching these flights, I always come across these, and I thought, why am I being so selfish and not sharing those with everybody? So when I find some good ones, I'm going to post them in there as well. Today we're going to be cruising along the Øresund Strait that separates Denmark and Sweden, leaving from the Swedish side and landing at the Danish capital of Copenhagen. And we'll be taking one of my all-time favorite sightseeing planes. This is the Mini IMP from A1R Design Bureau. And I'm not sure if this has been reconfigured for 2024. I just dropped it in the community folder, and it seems to be working just fine. But this thing is really cool. The last time we took it was over on our Gibraltar flight, which we took in 2020. But one thing I didn't mention about that flight, check out, this is the fully retracted position for these flaps. See how it's kind of elevated like that? And now that I've flown this a couple more times, I'm wondering if that's why you have to almost trim this completely nose down once you get up to start cruising. If you pull it back to the second position, it'll be flush with it, but it didn't seem to alter the flight dynamics. So this is one, there's another plane I think in the sim that's like that, where the full up position is a little bit above the wing like that. And I'm not sure why that is designed like that. So if you know, let me know. I think that's probably the way it is in real life. But what's really great about this plane, huge field of view. Canopy has no obstructions whatsoever. One of the best sightseers out there because a lot of them that do have a nice field of view like that are kind of slow. Not this thing. It cruises around 150, 160 knots. I think you can get them in real life with a 60 or 100 horsepower engine, which isn't super powerful. I think a 172 has like 160 horsepower, but this thing must just be super, super light, which leads to the second problem. You better turn the wind down a little bit or you will be jerking all over the place. Everything we're going to see out here today is, let's climb in real quick and I'll show you that stuff, is photogrammetry, but it's pretty performance heavy, so I had to turn some of the things down as well. And this is European photogrammetry, so not absolutely perfect, but pretty good. And the reason why we're out here is because when I first got into 2024, I was just kind of skimming around on my little webpage link that shows all of the different cities all over the world that are photogrammetry in the sim. I'm just going to say PG from now because it's so hard to keep saying photogrammetry. Copenhagen was one of them, and then this is just if you want to deviate from this a little bit. There's another town over here, it might be Frederiksson, that's also photogrammetry. And then I noticed there's a few POIs up here. There's a castle here, a big estate or something over here, and another castle of some kind over here. So I left from Helsingborg and realized that was photogrammetry, even though it wasn't marked on that little application. Cruised over here, the coastlines photogrammetry, this castle looks amazing, but then all this region right here is not, and it looks pretty bad actually until you get back over here. And this is just a tiny little strip over here. So instead, I decided to come down here and realize that despite Copenhagen being the only spot around here that is designated as PG, all of this is, and maybe even north of that. So you can cruise all the way down here to Malmö, like we're going to, all the way over here to Lund. That's also photogrammetry. And then, of course, Copenhagen is. So what we're going to do is come on out here, get into the Øresund Strait. This island is not photogrammetry, but there's some cool history about that. You can see I've got it marked as observatory, so I'll tell you about that. And Landskrona is photogrammetry. They got a nice big castle or fortress down there, a great looking shipyard down there. The coastline looks amazing. And then we'll come around Barsbäck Sham, which is a beautiful little town. They got a nice power plant here, which looks amazing. Cruise over to Lund real quick, just do one lap around there. And then come on down to Malmö. This port looks incredible. They got a big castle here, some stadiums. And then this bridge is amazing, very huge, and looks fantastic. Then we'll cruise over this island here and check it out. Seafort, Seafort, Seafort. And then we get to Copenhagen, which has a massive fort down there and all kinds of amazing stuff to see. It's going to be a pretty quick lap around, so we won't have a whole lot of time to talk about everything, so I'll just kind of point it out as we're coming around. And then we'll be back in. I think the whole flight is around 91 miles if you fly it just like we've got it marked out here. And again, this will be included in the video description, this flight plan, along with this bookmark file. So you have to know how to use a little nav map, and if you don't, you should. And I have made a tutorial for that somewhere down there in our how-to section. Check it out. If you like doing sightseeing in the sim, I think it's an absolute necessity. And because this thing's pretty quick, I'm just reparking a little nav map over here. I think the whole flight's probably going to be about 40 minutes. Okay, so let's go ahead and shut this, and we'll fire her up. Battery on. Let's step on the brakes. And mags on. Fuel pump. Start her up. Sounds are fantastic. Avionics on, our horizon's already on, alternator on, landing lights on, fuel pump off, parking brake off. So once we get up and going, we're going to bring the power back to about 2400 RPMs, and we're going to have to trim this to where it's the second notch from the top there. That's how much nose down trim we're going to have to give this thing, which is crazy. And I hate to have to break this to you, but this is another one of the planes where if you load up the flight plan, it'll at least put a flight plan in here, but it's just going to go from point A to point B. You cannot load the full flight plan in yet. So, yet another one. Alright, so we'll just do a rolling start here and take off. And this is Landskrona Airport. I could not get much information about it. If you remove the airport in little nav map and look at what it looks like on the satellite map, there's no planes or anything out here. You're going to see some gliders parked over here by these hangars. I don't know if they have gliders out here or not in real life. I didn't see any on the satellite map. But one thing you will see is a lot of donuts and burnout marks on the tarmac. So they're doing something out here. I don't know if it's flying planes or not. Watch how quick this thing picks up speed. It gets right up there. And we're supposed to give it full flaps for takeoff, but you don't need it. So I'm just going to leave them up. And we'll be rocking and rolling. All right, full power. Already up to 80 knots. Already up to 100 knots. And a little back pressure, and away we go. Gears up. And we'll go ahead and turn the landing lights off. See, there's those gliders down there. See them? This is not the map enhancement. This is the default map. I thought it looked better than all the others, so go ahead and roll with it. These fields look great. All right, now I'm bringing that nose down. Watch that trim up there. Down on our left. Keep bringing it on up. And once we get it stopped there, I'll bring the power back to about 4,500 or 2,500 RPMs, maybe a little bit less than that. And we should be good for stable flight. All right, power it back some. And we'll see how we do there. Look at these fields. So I set the time of day. You're going to have to move the month up. This time of year in February, it's a little bit dim out here in these northern latitudes. I set it to 1500 UTC time and switched the month to June. So that'll get it looking like it does here. So that town there to our right is all photogrammetry. And then right across the channel there, the strait, on that little point sticking out is where you'll see a huge castle. I'll try to remember to show that to you at the end. But look at these fields. Just looks great. We're going to get some popping, some map seams. It's really data heavy down by the cities, but all in all, I think it looks pretty good. Really good. And the first time I flew out here in 2024, when I first got it, when I first got the sim, I don't know why I decided to come out here, but it looked horrible, so bad. And that's why I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a total flop. But something has changed. I don't know if I changed something in the settings or if one of the sim updates changed something, but it looks way, way, way better now. So I figured we better fly it while it still looks good. So this is the Øresund Strait here, which is what separates the countries of Denmark from Sweden. And that is the island of Ven over there on our left, which we'll cruise over to check out, even though it is not part of the photogrammetry. It is considered the property of Sweden today, but the Danes held it up until the Treaty of Copenhagen in 1660. And as you can see, it doesn't have much elevation, but neither does anything else out here. The highest point of this island is right in the center, and that barely gets above 130 feet. And as far as interesting landmarks go, they've got a few of them. One is a church that was built in the 1200s and is still standing. I read they rent it out for weddings and other parties and things like that. So maybe you could torture your friends by making them pay to come all the way out here to watch you start the timer on your divorce countdown. I have a couple friends that had to go to one of those in the Caribbean a few years ago, and it was not cheap. The other landmark, which is far cooler, in my opinion, is one for all of us astronomy buffs. This island was given to Tycho Brahe by King Frederick II in the late 1500s. And if you've never heard of Tycho, he is considered one of the greatest astronomers of all time in the age before the invention of telescopes. And he also built one of the first large observatories in all of Europe down there, which you can still see if you visit the island in person. Unfortunately, you cannot see it out here. It did not get modeled correctly, but I'll show you where it is. And then on the satellite map at the end, I'll show you what it really looks like. But one of his many breakthroughs in the study of the heavens was establishing very precise calculations to account for and predict the movements of the planets. And he also proposed the idea that everything we see up there has not been there forever, as was the prevailing opinion at the time, and that stars do form and die all the time. And the big catalyst for his theory was a massive supernova in 1572, which is now commonly referred to as Tycho's supernova, though he was not the only one to notice it. It was one of only 8, however, in all of recorded history that could be seen with the naked eye. But he was so obsessed with that thing that he wrote a book about it in 1573 called Concerning the Star, New and Never Before Seen in the Life or Memory of Anyone. Sounds like he was trying to get ahead of any potential trolls with a title like that. But another big thing that came from all that was the understanding that whatever was going on up there was significantly further away than the moon, and so were comets, which people originally thought were atmospheric phenomenon prior to that point. Wow. Well, you can tell who's using all the fresh water down here, can't you? Okay, so the observatory, see right in the middle there, the only spot where there's kind of like a little crossroad. And in a second, we're going to see something right smack in the middle of all that looks like an ornate little garden area. And to the right of that, well, right across the street, you'll see a tennis court. And then directly to the right of the tennis court, where there's some trees right along the road, that's where the observatory is. It isn't really big. And look at that thing. It looks like a landing strip of some kind. Check that out. That's not marked in the sim, if that's what it is. That would be an odd spot for a landing strip, and it looks a little bit short, too. But other than his contributions to science, one of the more fascinating facts about Tycho Brahe was that he wore a prosthetic nose, and more than one. He had a regular brass one for everyday wear, casual wear, and a silver and gold one for special occasions. But he lost his original honker at the age of 20 after getting wasted at an engagement party, speaking of weddings, and getting in a sword duel at night after arguing with another guy about who was the better mathematician, which is both amazing and awesome. Having the blinged out replacement nose just ices the cake for me. He also had a gigantic handlebar mustache that went down to his shoulders. Total badass. Wyatt Earp would have to kiss the ring of a dude like that. And being from this area, you know he used some snuff too. I think I just found my new hero. Okay, once we get back to the coast, we're going to come around the western side of the town of Landskrona, founded in 1413 as a trading city. And as you will see, it has a very nice natural harbor area, but what's most interesting to me is a massive fortress built right along the coast in the mid-1500s. When they originally built it, there were 3 moat rings, 2 of which are still complete, incredibly, but the outer one is only on the northern side today. And 100 years later, after a few upgrades to the bastions, it was considered the strongest fort in all of Scandinavia, though it did succumb to a siege, the kryptonite of all castles, in 1676. Okay, so you see where that little thing kind of bends up in the water there, and then there's that little island with all the windmills on it? And then there's a pier on this side. You can see the fortress right there in the center of the moats. And you can barely see the outer ring. It's kind of connecting to that pier right there on the left. But it only goes on the northwestern and northeastern sides. And then this thing right here, this other island, was also some kind of other fortress. I don't know what it used to be or when they built it, but now it's a big bird sanctuary. And you can still see the shape of it. And check out this area down here. This looks so good. They got a great looking ship in that dry dock there, another little mini dry dock on the side there. Look how detailed this is. I mean, this is borderline competing with Auckland, which is so far the best detailing I've seen in 2024. Look at that. Look at that ship down there. Every little piece of garbage and pile of rubble, perfectly modeled, the rusting and everything. The colors are fantastic. That is unbelievably good. And I never would have come up here if not for just flying up to check out those POIs up there. I would have never guessed that the photogrammetry went this high up the coast. Really awesome. And this coastline looks really, really good. And apparently most of this strait is fairly shallow. Not a real deep passage. So real quick before we get to the next spot, I have to ask if anyone is going to the Flight Sim Expo this year up in Providence. We took a little flight up there in 2020 towards the end of that, before 2024 came out. I ran all the pricing for it. I figured if I stayed at the hotel they're recommending, which is one of the cheaper ones out there, which is where it is, the Omni, and a round-trip ticket and all that from Jacksonville, I figured I'd probably pay around $1,000 for the weekend. So I'm kind of debating whether or not I'll go. They said they've had record-breaking attendance registration so far. The main thing that would push me over the edge is if some of you guys are going, I wouldn't mind meeting you in person, so drop me a line in the comments if you're thinking about going. Maybe you can arrange to hook up. Enjoy a brew or two. This coastal area leading up to that point ahead is called Barsbäck, and right along the shoreline we'll see the Barsbäck Resort and Country Club, which is right at the end of that big patch of trees over there, which if you fly right over it is almost all blob trees. But they opened the country club in 1969 on the grounds of Barsbäck Castle, which unfortunately you won't be able to see because it's covered in trees. It's that next spot. So you see the big clump of trees to the left there, then there's some fields, and that next little square of trees up there is where the castle is. And it probably looked a lot more like a legit castle when the original structure went up in the 1100s, which is really old. But what's down there today was built in the 1800s and looks a lot more like a manor house. There's the golf course you can see right along the water there to the left. And you know what? That tiny little white dot right there in the middle of those trees, that's probably the castle. So maybe you can see it. Well, calling it a castle, the manor house. And this gorgeous little town at the point up here is called Barsbach Sham, which ends with an N. Population 438. And just south of that, right along the coast, we'll see the incredibly well-modeled Barsbach Nuclear Power Station. That place has 2 reactors that got fired up in 1975 and then 77 for the second one. But they shut them down in 1998 and 2001 as part of the nationwide nuclear phase-out, which has now been repealed. And I read they're going to demolish the rest of what we can see here as soon as they can get the waste storage facility complete sometime in the next few years. But this thing looks amazing in the sim. Look at this little town down here. And this is one of those flights for me that I really feel the realism. I really feel like I'm out here, especially for this part. We're going to get some popping up by the more populated areas, but out here it looks really good. And doggone close to being flawless. Look at the little sailboats out there. But look at this power plant. And this is just spot on. It looks exactly like this. Look at that coastline. Oh, the fields look great, and the default map too. Every now and then you can see a tiny little hairline seam in the maps, but just soak this in now before we get up to the big, heavily populated areas, because again, we're going to get a little bit of that popping. Look at that thing. Amazing. Looks so good. So this was a pretty good stretch between flight uploads for me. I try to get them up once every 3 to 5 days if I can, but like many of you, I got caught up in the whole DLSS swapper, upgrading to 4, playing around with the frame gen mod. And usually I follow Island Sim Pilot. He somehow always knows how that stuff is happening when it's released, how it works and all that. So I got it all loaded up. Then I noticed that like everyone jumped on that bandwagon. And I wasn't sure initially if it was working at all, so then I started watching some other tutorials, and next thing you know, I was so sideways with that I don't even know if it's working or not. There's something you can put in that'll show you right on your screen if it's working, but by the time I got to that, I was afraid I had jacked something up, so I tried to unwind as much of it as I could, just hoping the sim would still work. And then my audio hardware stopped working, and I couldn't record anything. It was just a total mess, so I can't tell if it's working or not. When I put my frame rate counter up there, it looks like it's still about the same. So I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. Man, these coastlines look really, really good. It would look a little bit better if I had turned the waves up some with the wind, but if we did that, we'd be bouncing all over the place. So we're going to make our way inland just a little bit to fly over the city of Lund, but before we get there, we're going to see the town of Bjard along the coast right there to our left. And that place sprang up in the 1800s as a little resort town for the residents of Lund. And the 2 locations were connected for a while by an electric railway that lasted from 1899 to 1940. And I'm going to guess the advent of cars is what did that in, because it's only about a 5-mile trip to get out here. And apparently there's what's called an open-air cold bath at the end of this big, long pier here, which in real life, that second one, the longer of the 2, doesn't have any boats on it. But that thing is really, really long. It's like 2,000 feet long, I think. I think it's called the Very Long Pier, or something like that. An open-air bath would be that last little thing sticking out on this side of it down here. And I've never heard of anything like that, so maybe one of you Scandinavians can fill us in with what that's all about. So that next patch up there is Lund, and that's probably where we'll start to experience the first of the popping if it's like any of my test flights. And that's spelled L-U-N-D, but I watched a couple videos of that, and it is pronounced Lund by the locals. And it's been around for quite a while. Some even consider it the oldest city in the country. Archaeologists believe it was probably founded sometime in the late 900s AD, which is actually pretty young compared to most big European cities. And there's some speculation that it may have been established by a guy named Sven Forkbeard, which is amazing. And I'd never heard of him before, regrettably, but since I'm such a raging fan of Time Team, I know all you Brits will recognize the name of his son, Canute the Great. And if you don't know that guy, you obviously aren't watching enough Time Team. But Lund began rising in prominence as a center of influence in the early Danish church, so this used to be Danish out here, even though we're in Sweden now. Getting itself a nice huge cathedral and an affiliated school in 10,085, which is still operational today, making it not only the oldest in Scandinavia, but most of all of Europe as well. The Academy of Lund also took the prize for Scandinavia's first university when that opened in the 1400s. But today the big player in the world of education out here is Lund University, which opened in 1666. And this place is massive. Their campus occupies the entire northeast quadrant of the city, and they have just under 50,000 students enrolled at their campuses, which is big. So I think we can probably guess what the big economic driver is out here in Lund. And we're barely going to be able to make out the Lund Cathedral right in the center of town, and it doesn't look like the type we'd see over in the UK. This one is grayish in color, and it doesn't have all the characteristic spires all over the top of it. But this thing is old too. Most of it was completed by 1145, which is within 100 years of the completion of Canterbury Cathedral, which is the oldest in England. And as we get closer, I'm going to try to show you where it is. It's really tucked down in there, so I'll see if I can use some sort of reference inside. I can see it right now, but you're not going to be able to pick it out. I'll see if I can use some kind of reference in the plane here to show you where it is. Alright, I'm going to tell you when it's right above our little red lever there for the canopy. Right now. See those two little white dots? Those are the two towers of it. And in real life they have points on them. For some reason they got modeled flat here in the sim. The city itself was originally under Danish control, as I mentioned before, along with the rest of this region. It was ceded to Sweden in 1658, then recaptured by Denmark less than 20 years later, which led up to the Battle of Lund, just north of town. And that wound up being a rather nasty conflict with as many as 13,000 casualties between the two sides. In just under 2 days of fighting, I read the whole story of that battle. But in the end, the Swedes claimed victory and the city, all of which was made official in the Peace of Lund Agreement shortly after the carnage ended. Look at this place. Really, really nice looking. And I haven't noticed too much popping. It was actually way worse than my test flight. Maybe the cache loaded itself up sufficiently. So all this we're over right now is part of the campus. Those eyeball-shaped buildings there. Stretching back down to the cathedral. We got a little bit of popping now, but at least the trees look good. And look at this field of view. This thing's incredible. I also read that a British bomber got off course after a Berlin raid during World War II. It was in 1943. And mistakenly blanketed Lund with anywhere between 50 to 100 bombs. And it sounds like the crew may have thought they were still over Germany. And why they would still have a full load of bombs out here on the way back is beyond me. Never mind why they dropped them all. Thankfully nobody was killed, but a lot of buildings got destroyed. And England apparently had to pay some guy back for blowing up all of his greenhouses. And I think they were incendiary bombs too, which must have been pretty nasty. How's our airspeed? I'm trying to stay right around 3,000 feet, which isn't easy hand flying this, because every little gust makes me shoot up in the air. We're going to pass just north of the town of Loma along the coast right ahead of us. And that town's history is all about brick making. They've been building things to build with since at least the 1600s, but in 1854 a guy named Franz Kockum opened a factory that would pump out more bricks than any other location in all of Sweden. And since you have all those bricks lying around, why not put them to good use and make yourself a beautiful little harbor, which they did. And we'll check out as we cruise by. And one of the reasons this was such a prime location for masonry, apparently, was the soil. I guess there's lime aplenty out here, which is one of the main components of cement. In fact, we're going to fly right over the island where they used to mine a lot of that stuff as we head across the strait. That's it, right out there in front of us, off in the distance. Also very low-lying. I don't know how they mined anything out of that. It's like right on the water. So as we come by here, you're going to see the main harbor there, which is kind of on the other side of it, where it bends up to that little point. And then the river coming up into town, they've got boats parked all the way up along the inside of that. And I thought maybe the sim had just added those. But as you'll see at the end, it looks just like that. They've got boats winding all the way up inside of that thing. While I'm thinking about it, someone had asked me why I don't just point at things with my mouse pointer like I used to, like I've pretty much done for the duration of the channel so far. And there's two reasons for that. One, a lot of people were saying they couldn't see it anyway, and I guess there's three reasons. Two, I'm trying to increase the immersion as much as possible. See all those boats winding up there inside that river? They come all the way up in there to where those trees are. That's pretty cool, huh? And the last reason, I'll confess to you guys, every now and then I will get a fact wrong or mispronounce something. Actually, it happens quite a bit. So instead of re-recording the whole video, I will go back and just do a voiceover for a certain part of it and try to make it as innocuous as possible. And if I'm pointing at things, it's really hard to sync it up precisely with what I'm saying, so I have just ditched that. I hope it's not too much of a distraction. That's why I'm trying to use in-the-plane markers. I'd say on average for most flights, I wind up having to edit 2 or 3 things post-production. Just makes it easier. Our last stop in Sweden will be the city of Malmö, the 3rd largest in the country, with a population of around 700,000 in the metro area. And most of its growth happened during the Industrial Revolution as it became one of the largest shipbuilders in the world. But in its earliest days, which was in the early 13th century, it was mainly just a ferry dock for folks heading up to Lund. The name Malmö has 2 theorized origins. Look at this port down here. Also looks fantastic. If you have a weak stomach, you might prefer a distortion of the word Malmhög, which meant something like gravel pile. But if you like slasher flicks, you're going to love the alternative meaning, which alludes to the legend of a maiden who may or may not have been run through a grain grinder on the town square. Oh, this is just looking so good. Look at all those cars in that big area over there. Do they have relief? It's kind of hard to tell. They're kind of popping in a little bit here. And as we come around, we're going to see the 15th century Malmö Castle fortification, also thoroughly moated, at the western edge of the original Old Town, and even that has its very own moat. And it sounds like this whole area used to be bristling with forts, but the castle is all that remains today. And that really cool looking building sticking up in the air over there at the southern end of the ports is called the Turning Torso. It's a residential structure with, I think, some office space too, that was completed in 2005, that tops out at 623 feet, making it now the 2nd tallest in Scandinavia. It got beat by nearly 200 feet when they opened another one here in Sweden in 2022. Man, I'm still not seeing too much popping. This looks fantastic. So right on, see that big green patch right there? Right on this side of it, there's the big castle. And you can see the moat going all the way around everything just to the left of that, which is the Old Town. Yeah, we're getting a little bit of stuttering now too. There it is down there. We're going to see 2 big stadiums just past this triangular-shaped park right here. On our left, the northern one is the Old Malmö Stadium, which was opened in 1956, and that's slated for demolition at some point so they can make a big swimming pool complex. That's the one you can see with the big field right there. And then just south of that is the new one, and home to the Malmö Football Club. And they moved to that one in 2009. And that also looks really good. Yep, all I'm getting is just a little bit of stuttering. The popping seems to have gone away, so maybe everything is cached up nicely. And a little bit further to the south, right next to that building that's sticking up next to the side of our glare shield, we're going to see Malmö Arena. And that opened in 2008, and it's home to the Malmö Redhawks ice hockey team. And that's also the 2nd largest indoor arena in the country with a capacity of around 12,500. And right across the street from it, on this side of it, that thing that looks like a park or something, is a big shopping mall with grass and bushes all over the roof, both in the sim and in real life. I'll show you that when we're done at the end. It doesn't have that many trees in real life. And check out this quarry down here. This thing also looks amazing. Look how detailed that is. Looks like they might have a few too many trees in it though, although it does look like it has been disused or abandoned for a while. We're getting a little popping now. That looks amazing. Really, really good. And this massive, beautiful span right ahead of us is the Øresund Bridge, which is a very appropriate name since it's crossing the Øresund Strait. That was completed in 2000 at the cost equivalent of around 2.7 billion US dollars. And believe it or not, that is the first bridge ever built to link these 2 areas. They've been talking about it for nearly 100 years, but kept running into issues like world wars and economic constraints. And the part you see above water here is around 5 miles long, and then it dips into that little man-made island and tunnels underwater for another 2.5 miles. And the main reason they decided to go underground is that a bridge would have run right next to the big airport, which is right on the other side of it there, on that peninsula. Which we'll see quite well in a few minutes, because that's where we're going to be landing. And I should add that that's a vehicle and a railway bridge, and the 2nd longest of its kind on the continent. And man, it seems like these guys got 2nd place for just about everything out here. Which is a lot more than I can say about my hometown of Jacksonville, that's for sure. And that is Saltholm Island, dead ahead. And that one is Danish and also extremely low-lying. The highest point is just 6 feet above the water. So I think that thing floods constantly based on what I was reading. And no, it's not man-made. It's a fairly new addition to the strait out here, popping up just 4,000 years ago as sea levels receded. Yes, they were receding 4,000 years ago too. And as you can probably guess by the name, it means Salt Island in Danish, and they named that little one for that tunnel for the bridge, which is man-made. They call that one Pepper Island, which is pretty cool. but probably doesn't rise to the status of being awesome cool. And as of 2021, Saltholm had a population of 2, down from its peak of around 300 in 1916. And the reason all those people were out here probably had something to do with all the batteries they built out here during World War I. And you can still see the traces of some of them out here, but it doesn't look like much is left. That little green speck towards the center of it is one of them, and then we'll see a couple spots with some residual moats still around them. All the way on the other side, you can just see a little bit of a moat. And then back on this side, we'll also see a couple. In the early 1700s, Copenhagen was using this place as their Ellis Island, requiring new arrivals to hang out here in quarantine for 40 days before they could come ashore. And much like the whole masking thing here in the US, even after they lifted that requirement, people kept coming out here to spend 40 days in abject misery just to demonstrate their unyielding loyalty to the officials who instituted that. I just made that up, but after what we've witnessed with COVID, it wouldn't surprise me at all. That big green rectangle right there might be where the quarantine facility was, because I don't see any other big foundations or anything out here. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, this is the island that I was referring to, where they were mining up all the cement for that factory, or the lime they were using for it, which may be what those depressions are out there. And you can see little houses right down there along the coast. The Google Maps said they were farms of some kind, but I'd hate to be farming out here if it's flooding constantly. And I think they have a little museum somewhere out here too. Well, I'm glad I left some wind, because if there was none at all, you wouldn't see any texture on that water. It would just look like a piece of glass, so even with 3 knots, it's looking a little bit more realistic. Look at those little houses. Beautiful. Just beautiful. And I read there were some considerations about replacing the main airport with a new one out here. This was back before the bridge was built, and they were going to have the bridge cross up here, across this island, to bring traffic to the airport, but all that was canceled after people started to raise a fuss about the ecological damage, which would have obviously been quite thorough. Alright, as we plow towards the center of Copenhagen here in a minute, we're going to have 2 little island forts, which you can see both of them dead ahead, which unfortunately are not photogrammetry. They look pretty cool in real life, but they'll just appear as little lumps here in the sim. But I'll show you a close-up view at the end when we look at a little nav map. This first one here is called Flakfortet, which has nothing to do with the German word flak. In Danish it means sand shoal, so this would be called the Sand Shoal Fort in English. And this one is also an artificial island and is the youngest of the 3 harbor forts we're going to see, being completed in 1914. And it was used for military purposes all the way up until 1968, with the last installation being a Hawk anti-aircraft missile battery. And today it's open to the public for recreation, some occasional concerts, and even a few tasty treats if you're hungry. They got a little restaurant down there too. So this outer ring of whatever it is, the breakwater, looks very realistic, but in real life, as you're going to see when we're done, it's just got batteries all over it. It's just going to look like lumps and trees here, which is too bad. And it's kind of interesting it's facing that way. There's the harbor directly behind it, and it's kind of just facing back towards the other end of the channel instead of the harbor. You'd think they want the most defensible side facing the land there, but it's not, which is kind of interesting. This next one is Middle Grounds Fort, which means what it sounds like it does. And this one is a good bit larger than that first one. In fact, it was the largest sea fort in the world after it was completed in 1894. And for this one, I did find a really cool video of someone taking a walking tour of all the ruins, which I will link in the description. There were so many tunnels running through that place, it's practically hollow, which is definitely my kind of landmark. And it really doesn't look that big from here. I'm trying to think of other sea forts we've seen. I feel like we've seen others that are bigger than that, but none specifically are coming to mind. And we'll see how this one... It looks like it's got some more elevation than that other one. Both of them are actually kind of, set up pretty high because they had to get the cannons elevated a little bit. And it looks like that one does have some kind of a hill on it. At least on the other side. It looks a little bit flat on this side. Let's see what that is. And of course they got their obligatory windmills out there. Alright, what do we got here? So it looks like... Oh, yep. You see what's going on there? That is the transition into photogrammetry. So there's just a cliff right in the middle of it. But let's see if the side away from us looks better. Nope. This has too many trees too. I don't think I saw any trees on the map. Nothing but batteries. Amazing. Okay, we're going to do a full loop around downtown Copenhagen, which is just so packed with cool stuff that I'm not going to have anywhere near enough time to talk about it all. So I'll just point out everything as we fly by and give you some quick facts. Obviously, that's the shipping port down there for the cruise ships. And if you fly around the other side, and I had the sun in a different position, they've got painting all over the sides of them that you can actually see, which is pretty neat. But look at this side. It looks really, really gray. So I think what's going on with that is probably when the image was taken for the photogrammetry, that was just in the shadow, because look how detailed the top of it is. But if you make it a little closer to sunrise, you can see the other side pretty well, and it does have pretty cool looking painting all over it, livery. So coming up in this little open area, once we get inland a little bit, look at this port too. Look at all those containers down there. Amazing. Oh, it looks like there's another cruise ship over there too. This is nice. If we don't get any popping here, then I'm going to do a backflip because it was just popping all over the place last time. I can already see a little bit of it coming in. So that stadium right there is called Parken Stadium, which opened in 1992. And that's home to Copenhagen's big football club. And that one has a retractable roof. And on some of the satellite images, it was open, but it's obviously closed right now. Okay, so let me see if I can kind of get you pointing in the right direction just by describing it. So you see that big waterway cutting the city in half there. Directly across that, by the end of that first little bridge crossing it, on the other side of it, there's a big park with a bunch of museums, their botanical garden, and in that little open square, we'll see it much better when we come around the second time, is the relatively small Rosenborg Castle, and that was built by King Christian IV in 1606 and was used as a summer cottage, which is kind of interesting because he had some other big houses out here too. It's really hard to see from here. It's really dark. We'll see it better when we come around because you'll see the top profile of it. And then as we come up here, okay, so here's how you find this one. See those train tracks coming in there? That's coming right into their central station, just to the left of where that waterway ends there. Yeah, we're getting the popping now. Look at that. So just to the left of the central station, you see all those trees? That is our only amusement park on this trip. And it's called Tivoli Gardens and was opened in 1843, making it the third oldest in the world that's still operating. And despite its small footprint, that place looks really cool. I'll also include a video link of that one in the description. And we should be able to see some roller coasters kind of poking out of the trees. So it's nice to be able to make out some stuff down there. And it looks pretty good too, not all filled in and everything. And then directly east of the park, we'll see that U-shaped building there with the green roofs, kind of silverish looking. That is Amalienborg Palace, which houses the offices of all three branches of government and is the only building in the world that can make that claim. See the roller coaster there in the park? In that top right corner? Prior to 1794, that was the royal residence for Denmark and is the most recent of many castles to sit on that spot since 1167. And this big perimeter moat with all the ramparts was also built by Christian IV in the early 1600s. And not without good reason, this place has been attacked a lot. And I'm really glad they didn't fill that in because look how awesome it looks. And when we come around the other side, you'll see, I think they went all the way around the city at one point because you'll see some very faint remnants. If we can see them in the sim. We can definitely see them on the satellite map, so I'll show you that when we're done if we can't see them here in the sim. But that's cool looking, isn't it? That big white building down there along this side of the river is their opera house. It's got a little lip sticking out of the front of it. And that was completed in 2004 and is one of the most modern and expensive ones ever built, costing roughly the equivalent of $370 million US. So pretty fancy place. Our last sea fort is right up here at the mouth of the river. It's called Trekkener, and is also the oldest of the three we saw on this trip. Like the others, this one is man-made. They started construction in 1713. Look at that thing down there, right at the bottom of our screen there. Looks like a factory with a big slope on it. That's got to be a rendering error of some kind. And before I get back to this fort, this little shed down here by the water, I don't know if we can see it because of the shadow. It's got like a face or something painted on it. See the two? There's a little one and a big one right next to it. The one on the right, the bigger one, it has a face on it. Can we see it? Oh, I got too much of a shadow on it. That's neat looking. Be sure to look for that if you have the sun in a different spot. But they started construction of this little fort here in 1713 by sinking 3 huge warships on that spot. One of which was called the Trekkener, which is how the fort got its name. How cool is that? And since this one is fully photogrammetry, it's going to look pretty good. And it does look like that in real life. Very neat. And coming into view right now is our fort grand finale, the massive Castellet Fortress, right down here on the northern bank of the river. This was completed in 1664. That's it, that star-shaped thing right there. And has seen plenty of action over the years. And I saw some maps of the original layout. At one time, the moat that still surrounds it today was linked up with a larger northern perimeter moat that kind of looked like the one on the south side of town. And we might still be able to see a little section of it up here. Okay, see that green spot right in the center, just to the left of the waterway there? You can barely see the profile of Rosenborg Castle there. It's just so small. But that's it down there. And that bigger building just in front of it right now is their National Gallery. And then just on the other side of that is where the botanical gardens are. It's just too small to see, and we're flying over too fast. As we make our way into our final turn up here, as we take our base leg, although we're not really taking much of a base, we're going to see a big open green space containing the zoo, which actually looks pretty good for a sim zoo. And that opened in 1859, making it one of the oldest in Europe, but not the oldest. I think we saw that one on our recent trip up to London. And right in the center of the whole park complex, see that thing looks like a baseball diamond down there? That's where it's going to be. The zoo is going to be on the right side of that, and right behind the zoo to the left of the zoo, we're going to see another gigantic summer home for the royals. This one was built in 1735. And all these summer homes kind of make me wonder where they live during the winter. We're only about 60 miles north of the most southern point in the country, but maybe that was the whole point. Summer was probably the only time warm enough to do anything outside, so why not try to get as warm as possible? So in that green spot right there, right in the dead center, that's the big castle, and to the right of that is the zoo. And on the southern side of that castle, they've actually got some pretty nice looking gardens too. That'll be fun to look at. Yeah, we're getting some popping now, but that's still way better than it was before. Guys, I wish I could have taken a screenshot of how bad this area looked the first time I flew out here. This is a night and day difference. There's the zoo. Not bad, huh? We've seen much, much worse than that, and we'll see our runway coming into view here in just a second. Castle looks good, gardens look good, fantastic. So a few quick facts about Copenhagen Airport as we make our way in. It is the largest airport in the Nordics and also the busiest, moving around 30 million passengers in 2024. And it first opened in April of 1924 as nothing more than a few big fields with lots of sheep used to keep the grass nice and short. And the first paved strip was added in 1941, during which time the airport was used strictly for World War II military service. So we're pretty much going to be able to just coast all the way in here. This thing loves to glide. And they got 3 big strips at this airport. All of them have ILS too, so you got 6 ILS options. Train yard down there looks amazing. And I'm not sure what the approach speed is. It didn't say in the checklist, but I don't think it stalls until about 60 knots, but we're going to be planing forever. Luckily, this is a pretty long runway. Or I should say flaring forever. Use proper terminology. Okay, gears down. Pump. Lights. And we'll start dropping the flaps once you get a little bit slower here. Can we get all the way in just coasting? We're going to find out. Look at that little building to the right there. That's neat looking, huh? And they've got quite a few helipads out here, too. If you feel like you want to take a helicopter, nice big ones. You could see them when we were flying by. I think they got a couple big hospitals out here. Look at this thing. It just does not like slowing down. I think it's just so light and so aerodynamic. How's our airspeed doing? So we got 3 notches of flaps now. Okay, so a little housekeeping as we're coasting on in here. If you're not part of our Discord server, that's where you can join to meet some awesome people. And man, we've got like 150 members in there, and only about 7 people ever get in there and talk about anything. So don't be a stranger. Say hello. Last notch of flaps. And while you're in there, you can recommend a flight for us in our Suggest a Flight section down there on the left. That will enter you if we upload the flight in our quarterly flight plan competition, where you will win at least a $75 gift card to the sim vendor of your choice. As a sim community, at the end of the quarter, we will vote on the best one. And we just had our most recent winner. It was that Colorado Canyons flight, which wasn't all that surprising because that was amazing. In fact, now that we've had about 3 months, I need to upload another, just a natural scenery type tour where there isn't much to talk about. I had fun making that. It took forever, but it came out pretty cool. And we get a little bit better with each pass. All right, I think I'm going to have to give it a little bit of power here. We're slowing down quite a bit. Well, we're still in 100 knots. And it looks like the Pappies, I can't really see them. And you can see we have a significantly displaced threshold, but you can see the taxiway goes around this end of the runway. That's probably why. And this is, I think, a handcrafted airport, so performance is going to be horrendous down here. And I don't really get that. You know, I've always said I don't like buying airports. I mean, you just see them for a second. Such a massive performance hit. I mean, if you're in a jetliner too, those things already devour performance. I mean, it's just so bad and so hard to deal with. You have to turn the graphics down for your whole flight. Unless you're going to switch it in between. Yep, look at this stuttering we're already getting here. We're still just coasting, guys. That is crazy. And watch when I start to flare, it's just going to keep on coasting. Luckily, there's kind of an uphill grade once we get over that threshold there. And hopefully we'll hit the first taxiway, because the next turnoff after that next one, not the first one after the threshold, there's one more, but then it's the runway. Alright, just flare it. Flare it, flare it, flare it. Burn, burn, burn. Look at that rise there. Pretty cool, huh? So, which of you guys picked up a 5090 already? I bet it's nobody. And I'll tell you what, if I did get my hands on one, I would probably hold on to it for about 24 hours, resell it for twice as much as I paid for it, buy an entirely new computer, and then in a couple more weeks, once they become more available, I would buy another one at regular retail prices, and I'd have a paid-for computer, which would be great. But I don't think too many people got their hands on one. Very hard to come by. But I'm going to get one. I have a 3090, and I've heard it doesn't make that much difference as far as the computing power, but just not having to mess with all the frame gen stuff and all that would be great. Flaps up. So I'm not going to drive all the way to the airport, because we're just going to stutter our way up there. Whoa, we're flying. Let's slow down just a little bit. I'm just going to park somewhere up here, and then we'll take a look at a little nav map. So if you did get a 5090, I'd be very curious to know where you got it and how much you paid for it. I had a little notice to Best Buy to let me know when they came online. By the time I saw it, they already sold out. I think that happened in about 20 minutes. Let's see, this area up here between these lights looks pretty good. So that's where we're going to go. What a great flight, guys. Really cool. So hang out for 1 second, and we'll take a look at little nav map once we get her shut down here. Okay, so let's just kill the mix. And the mags. And open the canopy. I don't think the engine sound changes when you open and shut that, but you can tell the outside sound does. Alright, let's zoom out and turn off the centering, get rid of our tail. Let me just show you real quick what this castle looks like up here, because it is awesome. Look at that thing. And this is one of those spots, since it is photogrammetry, I'm kind of wishing they didn't mod it up, because it probably would have looked fantastic as it was, and it looks a little bit fabricated when you fly over it, which is just too bad. And then the other spot out here where you get down to where it's not looking all that great, it's by this big lake over here. This place here, I think this is the one that's surrounded by a bunch of flat trees, which was so disappointing. And then there's another place down here somewhere. But I think all this area here is probably also photogrammetry. But I think this is the best flight. In fact, you could probably... Well, there's no airports up here. I guess you could leave from that one. I don't know how far north of Helsingborg the photogrammetry goes. Okay, so we cruised over here to the island of Vin, and here is where the observatory is. That little tiny thing right there, which unfortunately was just a little bit too close to some trees. And I think Tycho's castle was where this thing is now, and I don't know if that's the original outline of it or not, but you can see they got a little museum over there. And their tennis court, of course. And then that thing, whatever that was. I don't think that's a runway. The grass is a little too thick, although there is something that looks kind of like a touchdown spot there. Man, what could that be? It seems like it would be a pain in the butt to have it right in the middle of your wheat field or whatever that is. Interesting. Okay, and then we came over here to Landskrona, and here's the fortress, and from here you can really see that outer moat. And it just goes around the top two sides, and then they've built over it down here. But what a fantastic looking little spot that is. Just amazing. And then here's that thing, whatever that is. So strange. If one of y'all live out here, let me know what that's all about. And then here's the other fort, growing. Whatever used to be there. Now it's just birds. And then here's this port. Look at this. Oh, they don't have the ship in the dry dock. That looked just amazing. They did have that one down there, though. What an incredible area. Look at all this junk piled up everywhere. I mean, they nailed that. Really just nailed it. All this stuff, it was amazing. Totally amazing. Love it. And then we came down here along the coastline, down to Barsbäck Country Club, and here is the castle. Let's see. Yeah, so that was probably it, right in the middle of that green spot there. And boy, they must have had a lot of land if they built the country club on the land that used to go to the castle. But when you own a castle, you may as well have a lot of land. And then here's good old Barsbäck Sham. Beautiful little place. And here's the power plant, which also looked just perfect. That was amazing. And I wonder where they're building the area where they're going to bury the radioactive stuff. I wonder if that's it. Nope, that's just some old power lines. Alright, and then we came out here. Oh, here's the pier. Let's check it out. Okay, so you can see in real life there are no boats next to that one, but there are boats on that one. And then here's the outdoor bathing area. Boy, that does look shallow. I wonder how deep that is. Man, almost looks like you could walk in it. There's a boat floating around out there. I'd also like to know what's up with the outdoor bathing thing, especially in an area this cold. And then here's Lund over here. So the cathedral is right there, and you can see it does have two pointy tops on those. I don't know why, of all things, that got modeled flat in the sim, but it did. And then this was the original castle that was out there, and I didn't really go into the history of that. In fact, I couldn't find too much about it, but I think it's one of the administrative buildings for the university now, which is like all of this area up here. It's huge. And then there's a little house at the botanical garden, which you really couldn't see because there were too many trees, but that was a neat-looking city to fly over. Too bad there was so much popping there and everywhere else. And then we came down here to Loma, and look at that. They do have boats going all the way up inside there, just like that. Boy, imagine trying to squeeze through that. Yeah, it looks wide enough. Maybe. Careful backing up, though. And then we came down here to Malmö. This was an incredible looking port. And look at all those cars. They really do have that many. Look at that. I can't think of any other ports we've seen anywhere in the world with that many cars. Maybe like Singapore, but that wasn't photogrammetry, so it would not have looked like that. That is a crap ton of cars. Man. And there aren't even any ships like car ships parked there. They probably bring them in right here. And then here's the turning torso, which looked a lot better in the sim, but you can tell how tall it is. Look at that shadow. And then here's their castle, Malmö Castle. And you can see when we zoom out, you can see a lot better here from right over the top. I don't know if this was... It said that the original Old Town, which is still called Old Town, was this area here. This was the original settlement when they built it up. And they said it was an island, but this looks like they probably made a lot of this with fill dirt. So I'd be curious to see what that looked like, if there were any olden maps that showed what that looked like as an island. And then we came down here to the stadium. So this is the old one that's about to become a swimming complex. Here's the new one. And then if we go a little bit further down, we see the arena. And check out the roof of this shopping mall. Look at that. I feel like they should put like a putt-putt course or something on top of that. That would be really cool. And then this thing here is where, apparently, right now, the Tutankhamun exhibit is, if Google is correct in that. But that was just a bunch of trees in the sim. And then this huge quarry, which, you know what, that looked just like that. I was thinking, man, they put too many trees in there, but they didn't. It really is covered in trees. Looks like no one's done anything down there in a while. Boy, what an eyesore. But it looked awesome in the sim. And then here's the huge Øresund Bridge. And Pepper Island and Salt Island. Let's check out some of these fort ruins. So here's one of the... Whoa, jeez. Either it's green or not. Man, that's interesting. I wonder if it's grass that grows in there or what it is. But here's one of them. I'm guessing this is a fort ruin. It wasn't called that, but it looks an awful lot like a fort, doesn't it? And then this one's definitely a fort ruin. You can tell because it's called something battery. I wonder if they have any old cannon emplacements. Yep, there's a little one right there. And I bet they got some tunnels in there. Boy, they were really big into moats out here. I've got no problem with that. There's another little fort. And I just don't know what that thing is. It had no marker on it at all. But it looks like it used to be something pretty big. And then one more fort ruin right up here. That is crazy. Look at the difference. Springtime, wintertime. And they got a museum out here? That looks a little bit run down, though. Alright, let's check out these sea forts. Okay, so this is the one that I think was not photogrammetry. And yeah, look at that. In real life, it's just covered in cannon batteries. And I bet they have a lot of tunnels there, too. Look at that. Wow. That is awesome. And then we got the big boy up here. This one's also covered in them. Check that out. So this is the one that I do have the video tour of this area here. And it is like Swiss cheese, just filled with tunnels. Look at the size of that one. They must have had a big one in there. Looks like an amphitheater. Very cool. I'm so glad they don't just let that stuff fall into disrepair. I think it probably did. I think for about 10 years it was just abandoned and they covered it with graffiti and stuff before they cleaned it up and opened it to the public. No cruise ships there today. Oh, there they are. That was pretty cool. It's too bad we got that weird shading effect on the side. So again, if you have the sunset to where it's coming this way, you can see all the writing and the painting on the side of the ships. I think the back of it was just covered in a shadow. And then we saw a parking stadium here. Oh, and look, the roof's open here. Neat. And then as we came around, let's see, boy, we got lines going all over the place. We came around this way, and from this side, we could barely see Rosenborg Castle, which is right there. We got a much better look at it coming in from the other side. And then there's the Palm House in the middle of the Botanical Gardens. That was tough to see. This was not. The National Gallery, that thing was huge. And if we zoom out just a little bit, you can see where the old bastions were and the moat that went around that, which used to be connected to the Castellet Fortress over here when I looked at that older map. And then we came over here to check out Tivoli Gardens. Yep, unfortunately that got a few too many trees in the sim, but we could still see some of the roller coasters. And boy, that is right next to that train station, isn't it? Makes it easy to get to places. They say it takes about 45 minutes to get to the airport to downtown in a cab. And by the way, this is another one of the video tours that I'll attach in the video description. And then here's Christianborg Palace. Beautiful place as it is. Oop. And then we came along this side to look at this, which is incredible and awesome. Man, what a fortified place that was. And there's the Opera House there. I think this is fairly new. On one of the satellite maps I looked at, I don't remember if it was Google or the other Bing one. I look at all of them when I'm trying to find landmarks. This looked like it wasn't quite finished yet, and I don't know if it's just gardens or they're going to put like a zoo out there or what. Judging by these names, it looks like it's just going to be gardens. But boy, did they sink a lot of money into that place, huh? And then here's the current residence of the Royals. And I'm guessing they have all 4 of these places now. As if one wouldn't be enough. And then we came along this side over here, and here is where that building was that had the face on it. And if you live around here, I'd love to know what that's all about. This was a neat... Well, look at that. What is that? When we were coming around the side of this, I thought it was a factory that didn't get modeled right. What the heck could that be? They definitely have a garden on top of that. And all we know about it is there's a bar on it. I wonder if that's a hotel or something with just a big open space on the top that they planted grass on. That is really cool. I thought that was an error in the sim, but it's not. And then this is the oldest fortress here, Trekkener. Looked amazing, and lots of cannons. Look, they got a couple of cannons still in there. And then we came around and checked out the zoo and the last palace, Frederiksberg Slot. And that zoo looked pretty good. Very pleased with that. It could have been a lot worse, considering they do have a lot of trees down there. And then we came on in. So a couple of other things I bookmarked in case you want to explore a little bit more. There are more forts out here. There's one down by the water right here. Let's see if they got any cannons. Maybe. Looks like it's a marina now. And then along the north side of town, they have quite a few of them in various stages of disrepair and decay. This one looks pretty good. And that looks like a big RV park. And they also look like they have some mortars there. Awesome. And then if you go out this way a little bit, this one looks like it's a big park now too. Man, look at those things. That looks like it's something on the Maginot Line with a cannon sticking out of it. Amazing. And then this is where they start to get a little bit ragged looking. Look at this. It's right in somebody's backyard. And you know they probably got some tunnels in there. Imagine having that in your backyard as a kid. A lot of skinned knees and burned hands. There's another one right in the middle of a neighborhood of some kind. Check that out. And then this one here is right next to a big interchange on the freeway. Check this out. This one's probably in the worst condition of all. It's just basically a triangle left. But they didn't destroy it to make that road. They built it around it, which is great. And if you feel like flying out a little bit further, there's one more stadium over here, Brøndby Stadium, which I didn't even bother researching because it was so far out of our way. But it probably looks great in the sim. So that's it, guys. An awesome flight. The only complaint that I have, and again, it is so much better than it looked the first time I flew it in 2024. The popping was a little bit distracting, but other than that, when it was looking good, it was looking really good. So I hope you guys will fly it. It's a cool trip. And if you feel like coming up here, you know, just be ready. Once you get in this area, the landscape's not going to look great, but there are a couple of interesting POIs up here. I'd probably fly this one again if I was going to do it, but they are up there if you want to check them out. That's it. Learned all kinds of awesome things as always, and I cannot wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.